You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. For more than 10 days now, half of the residents of Jackson, Mississippi have not had running water. Officials said a majority of the city will see water restored soon, but caution there may be further delays because of water main breaks. Joining us right now is the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, Chokwe Lumumba. Doc, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Roland. Happy to speak with you and your listening audience.
Folks were sending me tweets over the weekend. So what's going on? What caused this?
The fact that we don't have a weatherized water treatment facility, which would have been millions and millions of dollars of investment to do so. During the winter storm that we suffered a couple of weeks ago, it led to the collapse of our mechanics in our water treatment facility. Valves froze, the screens of the portion of the facility which the inception of water comes in was complicated, and it brought down the PSI to about 37 PSI, and it takes about 90 PSI in order for water to distribute all across the city. People were still consuming water. It drained the reserves and the tanks. And so essentially we have to start over from scratch in filling tanks and distributing water across the city again. The prolonged period of time in which the winter storm stayed around the city also made it even more, it complicated the problem even more.
So we saw the similar issues in Texas where they were impacted due to the cold weather there. Was this on the city? Was it on private folks? Exactly, whose fault is it? And what break a resident's going to get are the water bills, in terms of what is happening there. Also, are you also telling them to boil their water? I mean, so really what's happening with the folks who do have access to water? Absolutely.
So the city was not unprepared. The city was unequipped. The problem is decades of a lack of investment in an aging infrastructure. Also coupled with the fact that we are experiencing hotter summers, colder winters, and more rain during our rainy season, which is taking a toll on our infrastructure. Those are the contributing factors. That's why, we've seen this same narrative not only across the South, but specifically here in Mississippi in multiple cities. And so that's a failure over time of both city leadership. That's the failure over time of state leadership and the federal government to understand that legacy cities are in need of strong investment in terms of our infrastructure that serves people each and every day. And so our efforts have been not only to restore water, but to meet people where they are with the resources. There have been distribution efforts across the city ever since we've been faced with this emergency circumstance, where we've been delivering water to those areas that are hardest hit. Here in our city, South Jackson gets it worse than the rest of the city because they are furthest away from the treatment facility, which means that the water has the furthest distance to travel to reach them, and especially those individuals living in high elevated areas. It is hard for them as well.
So it's been 10 days. When you say restore soon, what does that mean? Next few days, a week, 2 weeks?
Well, the way that the system is structured, it doesn't give us an update like updating our phone where it tells us an estimated time in which the update will be completed. What we can know now is that we are towards the end of our journey because we know that people at the furthest point for which we deliver water, many of those residents are starting to give us reports that they are seeing restoration of their water. But that requires consistency in the pressure that we are issuing. These systems were not meant to be shut down and restarted in this way. And so because of the natural occurrence that led to the shutdown, we are now having to build back up. And so, it's not necessarily a matter of not knowing what to do, as it is that time is a part of that solution. And so we need the time for tanks to fill. We need the time to balance the pressure and those issues that are competing issues and the domino effect that we suffer at an event like this.
All right, then. The Mayor Chokwe Lumumba, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
One of the things that this reveals, Michael, what happened in Texas, what's happening there in Jackson, Mississippi, is that these very basic, fundamental things that citizens take for granted, it's amazing what happens when things start acting up. Things like water, electricity, heat.
And you hate to look at everything being political, but you kind of have to look at it that way. Red states like deregulation. They like companies and power companies and water companies to be able to determine exactly how they winterize, if they're going to winterize at all, how they're going to do bills to the consumer, whether they're going to adjust them upwardly. There's so many different ways, and it just happens to be consistent in red states. We have all this deregulation. So then when Mother Nature and God comes in to create an event, as the mayor just said, it's not that they weren't equipped. Whether they weren't equipped or weren't prepared, I forget what he said. It just made a lot of sense. And that's what's happening in these red states where governor after governor after governor keeps deregulation in place so these companies can do whatever they need to do. When tragedy hits, they're not ready.
It was interesting, Julian. I saw this this one story that said that the deregulation of electricity in Texas cost residents an additional $28 billion. To me, that's sort of like a poster, a meme that anybody needs to distribute anytime Republicans start yelling deregulation. And that's not the case that happened here in Jackson. But again, part of the issue that we face is that basic fundamental things, when all of a sudden when something happens, oh my God, people go crazy. But this is why you have to pay attention to infrastructure, water, electrical grid, bridges, very basic fundamental things that Americans, we love talking about technology and apps and stuff like that. No, it's the basic stuff that when you lose it, you lose it.
Well, Roland, our infrastructure, our national infrastructure is crumbling. As you mentioned, bridges, about 10% of our bridges could fall anytime. You look at water supply. We saw it in Flint, now Texas, now Mississippi. Any state can have this kind of problem. We look at the quality of our schools. We get a D- according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, a D- on the quality of our schools. And we could go down the list. Deregulation is part of the problem, but the other piece of it really is spending government dollars on infrastructure. Now, that man who used to be the president campaigned on infrastructure, but nothing happened to infrastructure in those 4 disastrous years. Now, hopefully, President Biden will take a different approach. Federal dollars need to be joined with state dollars, and in some cases, local dollars, to provide basic needs. You're talking, like you said, water, electricity, gas, all the basic things that we expect people to have. I mean, when you looked at Texas last week, when you looked at those lines and everything else, it reminded you of a developing country, not the United States. And when you look at Mississippi, saying people haven't had running water for days, I mean, again, that reminds you of a developing country. When I went to Ghana a couple years ago, somebody told me to bring my own bottled water. So I put a case of water in my suitcase. And, it lasted me a week. That was good. But I'm just saying, you expect to do something like that in a developing country. You don't expect to have to do something like that in these United States. So our government, our national government, has been neglectful. And so Brother Lumumba, when he talked about not being unprepared, how could they prepare with a crumbling infrastructure?
Eugene, as I keep saying, it's the basics. It always comes back to the basics. And that is, we saw what happened in Texas, lack of preparation, how deregulation, but also it also speaks to in this country what unfortunately happens when the pursuit of profits over anything else. That's one of the reasons why you don't have the federal funds going towards infrastructure, because folks are like, oh, no, that's wasteful spending until you need it. Then they go, why wasn't it fixed? Because you idiots called it wasteful spending.
And I agree with you, especially in the broader context of infrastructure spending. But I think, in particular, in the situation in Jackson, I think if we're keeping it in the buck, there's a reason why the city council is fighting with Mayor Lumumba right now over this very issue, and it's not because of federal funding; it's because of the mayor's not providing proper leadership on this. It's an issue that he's been raising for the last 3 or 4 years. But unlike some of the cities in the Delta that dealt with the same issue, if not worse, there's been no bond bills put on the table. There's been no plan put on the table. Even today, he couldn't give a straight answer on when, folk were going to get their water back, if it's going to be days or weeks, and kind of danced around it. But I agree, hey, there needs to be federal funding for infrastructure. The basics of bridges, gas, electric, things that keep society running should be priority. But I think that, there's responsibility at all levels, particularly at the local level. And I think the mayor said it best, that, hey, there's a failure of leadership, and I think also that includes himself.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.